Article 26. Everyone has the right to an education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be made equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Education is so readily available these days to those with the internet that it is almost unbelievable that some go uneducated. There are some in Mississippi that have to fight to go to a non-segregated school, girls in Pakistan not able to go to school for fear of their life, and children in Syria whose schools have been destroyed by the civil war. All over the world, we must continue to fight hard to provide education for the betterment of everyone. Education was made a human right for a reason. According to the Special Reporter on the Right to Education, written by the United Nations Human Rights Office, the right to education is one of the most important human rights. All human rights are important, but education helps a person to realize and recognize other human rights. It is one of the best investments to make and hope safeguard the exploitation of children. There are numerous violations of Article 26, but some are more notable than others. Here are 4 examples of problems we still have enforcing Article 26. The Taliban is one of the biggest suppressors of women education in the Middle East. They claim that girls cannot go to school because it is against Islam. The Taliban breaks Article 26 because according to the UN, all have equal rights under the law, and the Taliban breaks that by not allowing women the same education that men get. 134 schools have been destroyed by this military, and 90% of them have been for women. Just 3 years ago, 120,000 women went to school in Pakistan, but now there are only about 40,000. The military intimidates all those around them. They go to the house of women in school and they threaten their lives as well as the lives of their family members. Effective, this is women not being educated enough to get jobs and forced to become housemakers. This hurts the economy as well as breaks Article 7 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Article 7 says, all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Boko Haram is similar to the Taliban, but on a much worse scale. Their name literally means Western education is forbidden in Hausa, and they have waged war upon education. They do not discriminate on gender like the Taliban do, but destroy places of education when they are capable. So far they have destroyed 910 schools and forced 1,500 of them to close for safety reasons. 952,029 students have fled this. 2,000 abducted as well as 19,000 teachers fleeing, and 611 of their deaths. 22 of the 27 local governments in the area they control have shut down education on all levels. These attacks started in 2009 and still continue, making a big problem for the future of the Nigerian kids they affect. Another outstanding problem for Article 26 is the school crisis for the kids of Syria. According to UNICEF, out of 7.5 million children in need of humanitarian aid in Syria, 2.5 million of them are going without an education. More than 80% of Syrian children have been harmed by the country's conflict, living in poverty, working instead of going to school, marrying young to survive. This is a cycle that will not stop if nothing is done. According to Education and Economic Growth, there is a correlation between education and a healthy economy. Surely, problems with education only exists in places like the Middle East and Africa though, right? Wrong. Very wrong. Just recently we have seen problems in our own country, schools in Michigan falling apart because of lack of funding and worse still, discrimination. On the 17th of May, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation in schools was no longer to be tolerated. It was found just this year that a school district in Mississippi still had segregation in place, with 2 middle schools and high schools, one for white people and another for colored people. This broke both American law and Article 26 because education shall promote understanding, tolerance and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace, and they do not do that there. So how are we fixing this problem? Each country does their own work to try to fix their education issues. An example of a good way that countries can help themselves in this area is Myanmar. They have set themselves goals to reach in order to acquire the kind of education that will make them a better country. So far, they have raised 0.8 million out of their 9 million target set in January 2016. A goal of theirs that they have already reached was their effort to get at least 34,000 kids a primary education. This does not seem like a large number to those in the United States, but it is a great improvement from their previous numbers and in such a short amount of time. There are also quite a bit of NGOs on the case. Some NGOs that support education are Tostan, For, Care Education and Rota. Tostan was founded in 1991 and does work in Djibouti, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, Somalia, and the Gambia doing community development education. For was founded in 1992 and works in 34 African countries for education advocacy. Care Education was founded in 1994 for teacher training and issue-based education. They work in 36 countries worldwide. Rota is an NGO founded in 2005 to rebuild education systems in countries with crisis. They do work in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, Iraq, Iraq, Lebanon, Nepal, Pakistan, Palestine, and Syria. A treaty to help further the push for education is the International Plan of Action for the decade. It states United Nations Human Rights Treaty monitoring bodies shall, in the course of their mandated functions during the decade, encourage the furtherance of human rights education, including through appropriate recommendations to states, to the High Commissioner for Human Rights and to others involved in human rights education. What would happen if we did nothing to help make education available for everyone? Economies of places that had the worst education would go way down. This can be seen by looking at the poorest educated places in the US. The median income for the top 15 places are from $9,000 a year per household to $14,000. They do not have enough money to send their kids to a good school or bring their own up to par, so kids take jobs early on. Without a good education, those that have a job won't be able to move up the ladder and stay getting paid minimum wage. The local economy in these places suffer because nobody can afford much of anything. When nobody buys things, places won't hire people to work and those unemployed people cannot afford anything. It is a vicious cycle that must be halted. The best method to ensure that everyone will eventually have at least a primary education is to help fund and get involved in NGOs. They only help places that need it and they are made up of everyday people that care. That is not to say that aiding the governments of these places would not help the fight for education, but since NGOs are smaller and have less restrictions when it comes to spending money, they are one of the biggest helps.